And you are now live.
Okay. This is Senate Appropriations, and we're taking testimony on the FY 2023 budget. And with us today, the Commissioner of Corrections and his Chief Fiscal Officer to present the corrections requested budget for next fiscal year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Commissioner for the presentation of the department's budget request. And as you would probably know, Senator Sears is assigned the corrections section of the budget. So, Commissioner, it's all yours.
Great. Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Nick Demmel. I'm the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Corrections, and I have with me Matt D'Agostino, our Interim Deputy Commissioner, and certainly our fiscal expert, as the Senator mentioned at the beginning. We're pleased to be here to discuss with you the budget for the year ahead. I know that we've sent a budget presentation document ahead to you. I'm happy to orient you to those slides, or we can put it up on the screen, whichever you'd prefer, to make it the easiest for you all.
Say, Mark.
Oh.
Did Chrissy send us a copy of that?
I don't know. Or do you want to do screen sharing?
Yeah, I did send a copy, but I'm happy to pull it up on the screen and they can walk.
I don't know, committee, what do you want? Do you want to have it put on the screen?
I've got it now, so doesn't matter to me.
Whatever. Sure, screen is good.
Okay, all right. Please, if you want to put it up.
Great, thank you very much. So if I can orient us to slide 3, the first two slides, the first is a title slide, obviously, and the second is the table of contents. But slide 3 is where the presentation really begins. So I'd like to take a minute and just walk you through some of the things that we're excited about and focused on in the year ahead. And then I'll hand it over to Matt, and he can walk you through the specific lines, and we can get into a discussion of the requests that are in here. But as this committee is well aware, the department is facing a difficult staffing situation, in part brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, and in part some lingering staffing challenges that we had before the pandemic began. What's become clear to me is this problem set is twofold. It is both a staff issue and a staffing issue. And what I mean by that is our staff feel disconnected, that the department doesn't value them as individuals, it doesn't value them as human beings, and that we haven't invested the time, the energy, the resources in them to mitigate some of the hardships that they're facing, particularly due to the pandemic. And so in part of the issue, I look forward to spending this year really reconnecting with our staff and making sure that the department is fully invested in every facet of their careers and indeed in their life outside of the department. And then on the other side of that challenge is the staffing situation. And so that's really the number of slots that we need to fill to get to a safe spot in the system and making sure that the system is running properly. I think there's a variety of different ways that we'll attack that problem set. Some of it is benefits, like the agreements that we have with VSEA, but certainly money is not the only solution to this problem. There are other things that we have to do. We need to recruit better. We need to retain the excellent talent that we have. And in order to do that, we're going to have to work harder at professional development and career planning. We're going to have to work harder at providing wraparound wellness resources that in many cases the state already provides, but our staff isn't taking advantage of. And so finding ways to connect them with those resources. And then there's another area that I think is really important and that's been identified to me in my conversations out in the field and with the facilities. And that is, we need to improve some process. We need to enhance our communication internally and externally, but making sure that people understand, our staff understand inside the department what we're doing and why we're doing it, and making sure they have a voice in those processes and those decisions. We've also heard a lot about improving the disciplinary process and improving the promotion process to make sure that it is in fact merit-based, and is promoting people based on skills and avoiding predated issues about promoting friends and kind of the good old boy network, if you'll let me steal the phrase. And so those are some of the ways that we're going to attack this, but clearly our first priority this year is to improve the situation for our staff and try to address our staffing crisis. When we get beyond that issue, though, we have several large policy areas and areas that we want to focus on as a department. And that the chief one amongst them is the justice reinvestment effort. And I know this is close, particularly to Senator Sears, but many on this panel. And so this is an area that we want to focus very heavily. And we have a couple of line items within the budget that I think will be focused on the initiative and the programming that we're interested in. And then I look forward to collaborating with this body and with the other committees of jurisdiction to really find ways to spend smartly the funds that we've recaptured from the out-of-state beds and other areas to make sure that those funds are invested in meaningful justice reinvestment programs. We also recently released the survey results from the Prison Research Innovation Network, and some of the members on this body were participated in that effort. This is a unique opportunity for us to be able to diagnose some of the long-standing systemic problems within the Department of Corrections and really problems that exist in departments of corrections around the country. And so we've just finished the research phase of that effort, and we'll now be moving into the innovation phase. And that will happen at Southern State, where they will create innovation councils, both among the staff and the incarcerated, to be able to come up with ideas to test and measure for impact so that we can begin to address some of those problems in ways that we haven't tried yet. If those work, I would love to take those ideas, steal those ideas from the print effort, and scale those across our system to begin to address some of those problems. One of the principal findings of that study, though, was the mental health and suicide contemplation rate among staff and incarcerated. It was alarming to me, and it's something that we needed to tackle immediately. So earlier this year, I launched a suicide prevention task force within the department to quickly study this issue and create initial findings that we could implement changes immediately. And then decide how, as a department, we're going to have a systematic approach to addressing suicide prevention and mental and emotional health issues for both staff and incarcerated in the year ahead and hopefully into the future. We just got the initial findings from that task force, and we'll look to implement that. And we'll also look to stand up a permanent suicide prevention team within the department to address those challenges going forward. There are a variety of other areas that we need to focus on this year, some of which are captured in this other items bullet. And certainly those are very important items, but I wanted to highlight a couple of those key priorities for you before we get into the budget presentation, so you knew where our focus was in the year ahead and some of the things we wanted to really dig into and spend our energies on. So with that, I will pause in case there are any questions, but certainly then hand it to Matt and he can walk us through some of the additional slides here.
So Commissioner, your priorities then will translate into funding requests, for example, on your staff or staffing, or certainly on the prison research. One of the things that was noted was that there really is no programming for inmates within the facilities, and that obviously is of concern. So I'm just wondering, are your priorities, once we get to Matt's section or presentation, it doesn't look like it is, with only a 1.72% in general fund, but perhaps I'm missing something.
Well, I think that many of these priorities are captured throughout the budget, and Matt can help us to highlight some of those. On the staff and staffing issue, certainly, we had the side letter agreement with VSEA to address some of the recruitment and retention issues due to the pandemic, and that was captured in the budget adjustment. There will, I think, be some movement here and there on the staff and staffing issue, but I really do think that the resources that we currently have outlined in our budget are they at least position us for success to be able to start innovating and moving down this road and addressing some of these problems. For example, communication between the central office and the field and the facilities rather, is a huge challenge that is frequently raised with me when I visit the facilities. It was evident in the Prison Research Innovation Study. To improve communications, we don't need a significant amount of money. That's a system change that I can make as the commissioner. And as long as I can reorient the department and make that a priority for us, we can do that without adding significant lines to the budget. And I think there are several examples that fall in that space. As for the Prison Research Innovation Network innovations, I think ultimately, at least for the first couple of years of those innovations, they will be small dollar innovations that they test at Southern State. If we see that those innovations are having the impacts that we hope they are, and there is a need to scale that across the system, I think we can cross the bridge at that point to determine how we fund those or whether the funding exists already in the department's budget to do it. I think it's too early to tell what those will look like or what that might cost. But certainly, I think most of these priorities are captured within our budget, and Matt can highlight that as we go through.
Okay, well, we're ready. Well, Bobby,
I
I think
no, I didn't think you could see bum.
I can. All right, so Matt, are you ready to take over?
You gotta jump over bum.
I am, yes, thank you. For the
All right,
record,
thank you.
Agostino, Interim Deputy Commissioner for Department of Corrections. Good to see everyone this afternoon. So we have a number of slides in here. Christy, if you wouldn't mind, the ups and downs start on slide number 7. I think that's probably the next one we should move to go through the budget. So working through the department's FY23 proposal is a total budget increase of about $6.1 million over the FY22 as passed appropriation. The general fund increase is $2.7 million, which is 1.72%, but that's exclusive of a $15 million technical adjustment for CARES Act and general fund swap that we'll get to. There are pressures on the general fund totaling approximately $2.7 million. A net of about $7.5 million of increases to the general fund against about $4.8 million of proposed reductions. And within that, general fund salary increases totaling approximately $6.1 million. So starting in our first appropriation, the administration, there's 4 line items for this. You'll see this consistently throughout all the appropriations with staffing. These are cost of living adjustments. The lines are salary, retirement, other fringe, and then benefit rate changes. And the total for the administration is $294,000 of an increase. Again, this is for all of the collective bargaining agreement, cost of living, benefits changes, and the like. So parole board is similar in that there's just those 4 lines that are salary and fringe related, an increase of general fund of $24,310 there.
I want to spend a lot of time on that. 24,000.
A little bit more in the corrections education to talk about. So there's, in addition to the salary and COLA related lines totaling an increase of $264,000, there's also a proposal here that shifts the funding, the majority of the funding from the school from general fund to education fund. Historically, that's the funding for the high school had been with the education funds. FY19, it was moved back from education to general fund. And this proposal is to put it back to education fund once again.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I
Our
might,
next slide.
Yeah,
we wish you
Senator.
we wish you very good luck in the House on that proposal, man.
This is not something that we're not sympathetic to, but there are only so many battles you can fight, and this has been one that we've had disagreement for a long time. But I don't need to tell you that. You have a big backfill because of the CRF using that money and having to replace it with the general fund that got freed up for one-time purposes.
Correct. Yes, a few lines down. Yeah, the $15 million is that adjustment to put the
Yeah.
money back in the general fund. Correct.
Mhm. Yeah,
So within
That-
correctional I'm sorry.
that just makes you whole, that 15 million.
That's right. Yes. So for correctional services, the personal services items, we do have the salary and fringe increase. That's a total of about $5.8 million across all of the staffing and cost of living adjustment needs there. We do also have, related to positions, a request for a constituency services unit position. So in 2020, Vermont DOC had established the constituency services unit, and this was to streamline inquiries from mostly from friends and family members of incarcerated individuals, but as well as victims, those in the community. The unit has never been staffed with a dedicated position. There is a part-time temporary position that's staffed it for the last year and a half or so, and some other staff whose primary responsibilities are not servicing the constituency services unit. So the hope with this request is to have a dedicated position for this unit.
All right, we had asked who the constituency was, and so what you're really talking about are people either in inmates' families or neighbors who have a personal interest in an individual in your custody.
Yes, a variety of folks, but largely that captures the majority of would be going to constituency services.
Senator Starr, you wanted
Yeah.
to ask something?
Well, I may have missed it. Up at the beginning of that area, salaries 1.3 million, but the retirement is 2.5. Is there an explanation for that?
Yeah, there is a big explanation, and that was when the review was done, and that's done thoroughly. It had been on a 5-year schedule. Some of the assumptions that were embedded in determining the ADEC, or it used to be the ARC, had to be revised. And that was when there was a fairly significant adjustment upward to reflect that reveal needed to be done. So that was not as big a jump for in the ADEC for state employees as it was for teachers, but that's what you're seeing here is, and that's why that review has been moved down to every 3 years with a very judicious monitoring of every year. So that's what you're seeing is when an ADEC is out of whack for a multi-year period of time. When you make the adjustment, it's quite a jump.
Yeah.
And if you disagree with that, Matt, you can weigh in, but I've been working with ADEC and OPEB for quite a while. And so that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm glad you I'm glad you know so much about it. So no, that's good. The
Is that just the pension though, Matt, or we're starting to pre-fund the healthcare benefit? So when you're talking about retirement, are you talking about both benefits?
Just the pension side. In that
Okay,
particular-
I assumed that was the case, but I wanted to confirm that. And of course, they have a lot of employees. How many employees do you have? Obviously, with 24/7 facilities, what is the how many employees do you have at this point?
So allocated to the department, there's 1,049. Those who work in the 6 correctional facilities, don't have the number right in front of me, but it's approximately 650 within correctional facilities, another 350 or so in the field, and the remainder in central office.
Yes. Okay. So they got a
Cool.
large workforce.
Yeah.
Other questions, committee? Otherwise, we'll keep going.
Sure. I
I
think
must apologize. afternoon, I mean, being the last, and we've been on the floor and we had a caucus over lunch. So we've really not had any break to our day. So you're kind of, maybe it's to your advantage to have people just sort of tired or whatever, but we'll keep plugging along here. So here we are to out-of-state beds.
Sure. So out of state, you'll see a decrease from 200 beds appropriated down to approximately 160 beds. It's a $1,150,000 line item reduction there. The current caseload as of today is 135 beds. So we are a little bit below what this budget proposes. As I'm sure you know from previous years, there's some years where we're slightly above and other years we're slightly below in terms of where we are today versus what the budget request is. Last year, I think at this time we were a little bit below 200 when the request was for 200. There's a little bit of uncertainty, not just at DOC within Vermont, nationally, in terms of what incarcerated population is going to look like as courts open up more fully going forward. There are concerns at many levels of an increase again, where we saw over the last 2 years significant decreases. But this is the approach here is that there's a little bit of space here, and as we would in any year, we basically wait until the year has begun. Then, of course, for budget adjustment, if there are some significant changes to the population, upward or downward. But this budget proposes slightly above where we are right at this moment.
So I'm going to expect a comment from Senator Sears, because that 1.1, what did you do with it? Use it to underwrite other parts of your budget, reinvest it, or what?
So correct. The 1.1 million here is effectively a bottom line savings from the reduction that we're looking at for the 23 budget. If we do reduce from 200 beds appropriated down to the 160.
Well, but there is,
Okay.
I mean, I thought that, and I recognize that we have all new Secretary of Human Services, Commissioner of Corrections, and et cetera. But we spent 2 years on Justice Reinvestment 2, and Justice Reinvestment 2 involved the judiciary, the administration, the legislative branch, and many others from stakeholder groups. And it's just like the first chance you get, it's a violation of that whole effort that just ended this January. And I am frankly amazed by the administration approach to this, and it's not acceptable. That money's supposed to go back into community programs to be reinvested to keep our populations lower. If justice reinvestment is going to work, we have to reinvest the money. And instead of putting it on the bottom line, now you now have, in my estimation, over $4 million in that's going to have to be made up somewhere else, because I doubt the House will accept the Community High School of Vermont. And I'm not going to accept that 1.1 million. There's no way. I won't even vote for a budget if that doesn't go back to justice reinvestment. That was the agreement. Senator Nichter and I have spent 2 years serving as members of that justice reinvestment working group. And frankly, it is astounding to me. And I know, Matt, I'm smart. I've been around long enough to know that I'm preaching to probably the person that didn't make the decision, but I'm just putting you on notice that that money is just as unlikely to happen as the 3.5 million or whatever it was for Community High School of Vermont. So your budget is built on false assumptions.
We will have a lot more discussion about that, because and we need to look at our language and how we expressed it and the intent. But I think our intent was always very clear, that we wanted this treated the same way as the choices for care savings, so that if you're spending less in one area of keeping this population, then you invest it in other areas, not use it to balance the budget. So we will move on, but I think you know very clearly our concern, and I expect you're not totally surprised by our response. So we'll obviously have more discussion on that. And we'll keep going. I guess we're recreation at this
Yeah,
point.
thank you. So recreation fund, much like the first few appropriations we looked at, what you'll see here is just the salary and fringe increases. Again, this is an increase of 34,255 to the recreation fund, which is a self-sustaining department fund here. And then finally, the Vermont Offender Work Program. There are cost of living adjustments totaling approximately $64,000 to that internal service fund. There's also a proposal. There's 3 vacant positions that are proposed for elimination here. I think we've talked about in our previous testimony and budget adjustment, the struggles that the proprietary fund is currently having. The cash balance is significantly in the negative due to a number of factors. As we are working toward doing assessments, analyzing, using grant funding that focuses on adult reentry and employment strategies to shift some of the way the program functions, so that we're still able to deliver vocational services, albeit perhaps in a different way moving forward. Looking at things like career resource centers, pre-apprenticeship roles, work labs, things of that like, versus a pure industry where it's manufacture and produce. So the same skills are being taught, however, without the financial component, particularly with the wood shop. This has been a challenge over the years in terms of revenues decreasing and the ability to be sustainable. So with eliminating these positions, it takes some of the liability, the financial liability that's kind of been challenging this fund and creating the downward pressure that's causing the negative balance to grow each year.
Well, we actually, in our budget adjustment, funded the 1.9 for correctional industries to deal with that internal deficit. And this is, which was consistent with the governor's recommendation. So if you make this change, are you saying that you would have dealt with that future internal deficits?
Well, it doesn't. I don't know that's an easy yes answer there. It's
well, then mitigate, reduce.
It reduces. So the real challenge is that there are currently 13 staff who are paid out of this fund. So there's the salaries and benefits for those staff, as well as any material costs, any operating costs for the correctional industries, as well as the work camps and work crews in the field and facilities. The revenues that come in, if they don't match or exceed what those expenses are, the cash balance goes negative. And as the revenues have significantly declined, not just at the correctional industries, the work crews and camps during the pandemic especially, they haven't been able to go out and do the work as they had been. So there's not really any revenue or very insignificant amounts coming in from that too. So in order to make the fund sustainable, this is an effort to at least reduce some of the overhead that there is. So revenues potentially could be smaller and still balance each year versus what we've seen the last several years.
Unless I'm missing something here, the prison study that the commissioner just talked about, one of the things that struck me at Springfield was the universal complaint from offenders: there's nothing to do. Well, I guess there's going to be less to do in other facilities. And that's, this is a problem. I mean, if we're going to be serious about spending the money on the innovations in I think it's called the Prison Innovation Project or whatever. If we're serious about it, I would suspect that we should be expanding things to do for offenders that, rather than contracting. So I'm just saying that this doesn't make sense to me. You look at the numbers in Springfield, and I think it was something like 90% of the offenders said there was nothing to do.
Yeah, Senator, I think you raise a valid point here. I think what we're seeing is we're at a bit of a crossroads where the things that we've done historically to provide training or the things to do, these non-correctional kind of either education training, vocational work, need to be retooled for the current era. And looking forward, what programs do we put in place that will best position the incarcerated population for success when they re-enter into the communities? And so we are working through a grant to try to review the programs we have in place right now and improve that system. But at the same time, we're looking forward into vocational programs and things that best prepare people to get them in a positive reentry situation, give them real skills that I think will be useful when they go out into the workforce. And it's actually a very good time to be entering the workforce if you have some of those skills. Because it's really easy to come by a job. And so I would welcome the opportunity to work with you on that and explore ideas that you have or anybody on this panel, because I think we are at a crossroads where the PRIN study that you highlighted says exactly what you said, that folks don't have enough to do down there at Southern State. We know that's not just at Southern. So we need to find ways to do this across our system, but do it in a meaningful way where they're actually getting the skills we think that they will be most useful for them.
I don't think there's any disagreement with what is being said. I guess what we're seeing is that there's no resources that are going to be made available to really support this agenda. If we want to overhaul, the old way of doing things, and obviously the correctional industries is an old model, but you talked about workforce training and mentoring and all the things that sound so nice, but they take some commitment of resources, and we don't see that happening to support the testimony that you're giving us. So how do you make that work when in fact you have it's such fiscal constraint that we're seeing here in the budget? It's not as though you're taking, well, of course you're operating at a deficit, so there isn't much, we can't exactly transfer a deficit, that doesn't help you any. But, how you're going to take that PRIN finding and put it into some kind of corrective action, and what those investments would be and what it would take to do them. So I guess that's what we're seeing, is this effort to do a better job with how we manage our facilities and the opportunities or the resources there relative to the budget. So I guess that's what the topic of discussion, and that is how you can do it within the constraints of the budget you're presenting to us now.
Well, I don't think the budget, the governor's budget, I'm not going to call it your budget. I don't think the governor's budget reflects the needs of the department and the changes that ought to be taking place. I just don't think the governor's budget fits. And I think we've identified several things already where your initiatives are great. No, we need to do a better job with our staff and our employees, and we need to do a better job of retention and hiring. We need to do a better job of training. Those are all admirable things. And we need to do a better job of reinvesting in community programs that will reduce recidivism. And we need to do a better job of getting inmates ready to go out into the workforce when they leave, because 98% of them are leaving at some point. But I don't see and all of those things, I think we all agree on. But the budget doesn't reflect that. That's where that's where I have a hard time. I don't know how we're going to make it reflect the goals of the department.
Yeah, I understand your comments, Senator. And I think The one, as it relates to the educational programming and the vocational programming, the reason that doesn't quite shine through the budget here is we have a grant in place that was secured in order to try to evaluate this process. And unfortunately, and I don't want to keep pointing to the pandemic as the reason for all our troubles, because that's not quite accurate. But in this instance, the grant work that was supposed to be started over a year ago is only now just getting started because of delays in the pandemic. And so what I don't want to do is come here and ask for a bunch of money that we can't smartly place into things we know will work. And I want to give those processes, the study processes, time to point out, here's how this money could be smartly invested, or here's how we could reuse the budget that we have in a more meaningful way to get to those occupational programs or the retraining programs. And so I understand your comments and I respect them. I do think that the budget maybe doesn't quite capture that because it's funding that's aside from these lines, and we're really at the precipice of moving towards that next phase.
Could I ask?
Yes,
Are these,
Senator Starr.
yeah, the people we're talking about, are they the men and women that go out and work like for nonprofits, like to rebuild our church, or could they work on redoing affordable housing projects, or are these the people?
You're
we're
talking about the work
about?
crew, so the work camp, and there's only one now, right, in St. Jay?
And Chittenden has a work camp as well, but correct, the large
Okay.
work camp is St.
Yes.
Jay.
Yeah.
So, but this isn't just dealing with St. Jay, it's dealing all over the state, and we've been talking about Springfield. So what are the guys in Springfield, what's their work program?
They don't have a work camp.
So what do they do? I mean, what? how do
That's
you
what the
teach them something
study
if you
showed,
don't-
that they have nothing. Is this the last slide, Matt?
This is, yes.
Okay, why don't we pull it down so we can see, so I can see my committee here.
Yeah, I don't know how you teach them how to do something if they never get to do it. So what are they supposed to be learning?
You were talking specific to Springfield, Senator?
Yeah, I mean, use that as an example, as long as that's who we've been talking about.
So through the community high school, the corrections education, there are vocational opportunities and work opportunities in the sense that folks who are incarcerated there are able to not just attend high school classes, but also get technical training and culinary skills. They can get like a ServSafe certification, other workforce certifications. There's also a workforce development program that folks are able to get certified in. Unfortunately, though, the space within that facility doesn't allow for industry or any other larger vocational efforts. So it is limited to the earlier points in terms of what the Prince study showed, and it has been a challenge in that particular facility with the lack of vocational space that's dedicated.
So you don't have any large buildings then?
No.
Correct.
Senator
They have
Westman,
they have a
you have a
pad. that-
question? I'm sorry. Did you have a question, Senator Westman? No. All right, Senator Sears.
There is a pad at Springfield that was designed to have a correctional industries foot on. But they spent the money on the road and water and sewer instead of the correctional industries. That's the history of it. So it goes back that far. There is a space where they had planned a building. Never got built.
I mean, we talk about affordable housing constantly. We saw that on the news a week or so ago where the kids in Plattsburgh, New York, right outside, built a spec building, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, pretty decent home that you could move for $80,000. And I don't know why we haven't, and with all the carpentry work that's coming down because of no housing, I don't see why, if you had a carpenter there to teach them, an electrician, why they couldn't learn how to be carpenters and people, but
Well,
I
I
don't
think
know.
we've got a lot more discussion to have here in terms of what
Yeah.
kinds of programming makes sense, and our concern about the budget and the extent to which that gives the department the capacity to sort of actualize their vision of what would be better than what has been the case. Senator Netka?
I was just going to say, many years ago, the women, when they were in Springfield, did build, I think, 2 houses at the prison and moved them out. And they're in, this house were moved into Springfield. But I think one other very important part of having something happen, whether it's you're producing a great product or not, is teaching many of these men in Springfield, how to show up for work. I mean, you're told to go there, but how to not fight with your co-workers, how to take orders. I mean, that's a huge part for many of your clientele there.
Yeah, the old soft skills, as they call them. Okay, well, there's a lot more, and maybe you have maybe the grant, but at some point, grants are good to support that, that planning and thinking and analysis, but oftentimes they translate into a need for funding to sustain it after the grant ends. So that's always a challenge with grants.
And just another thing might be to, Matt Dunn and his Innovation Center is right there in Springfield. I don't know if there'd be anything there that they could provide anything to work on.
Well, since we just gave them $500,000 for match, Alice, maybe that's a good connection to make.
Yeah.
Because in this workforce environment, I mean, everybody's focusing on, the import, but we have, in fact, Vermonters that are here. They're marginalized. Some are incarcerated. Some are just, hopping around from job to job. And so we have some potential here. And we already hear in many states that people that have had a criminal record are now even being recruited because the workforce needs are so great. And so here's a group of Vermonters that really are right on the margin. And the question really becomes one of how do we develop that human potential in the same way that we've talked about other Vermonters, or the fact that we want to solve our workforce problem by importing, workers from other states. So I think, it's an interesting discussion to have, and one that we probably will have. So Senator Sears, do you have other questions or comments?
No, I think, I do have one comment.
All right.
I've been hearing from some people who work in the field concerns about being forced to work in the facilities, feeling that they're not trained, or that at their age it's not something they're able to do. And I need to say that. I mean, I realize you're at a real breaking point in terms of staffing facilities, but it is of concern, and I would hate to see somebody who's injured on the job, or who just quits as a probation officer because they don't want to work inside.
Other comments? Okay. I'm sure that we'll be having more discussion. As I said, Senator Sears will, I'm sure, be following up, as you would expect. And we will have a lot more discussion as it relates to what we want to have for our policies around this population.
Can you get me a better list of the investments in the communities that you're making under justice reinvestment? Not today, but in the near future.
Certainly.
Yeah. That would be
That would be
good.
helpful to be able to compare with the 1.1 moving over.
Any other comments? I'm just looking at the committee. We've had kind of a long day.
For
So
sure.
if not, I'm going to suggest then we